Thanks, Nintendo. I hate this. Today's video is brought to you by Skillshare. My friends, we've talked about Skillshare in the past because they're an amazing online learning community for anything that you want to take seriously with your education, such as design, business, technology, and a whole bunch of other categories. When you sign up with the premium membership, you actually get access to their high quality classes for experts working in their field, and especially with us moving back to the States, one of the classes that we've taken huge interest in is indie filmmaking. Get the blockbuster look on a DIY budget because, oh my friends, our budget's slimmed down moving back to the United States. But their class helps us so that we can actually make sure that we're doing the best that we can with the limited budget that we've got. You get world-class classes, and the best part is it's super affordable, less than $10 a month when you sign up for an annual subscription. And the best yet is that if you use the link in the video description, you'll actually get 2 months of Skillshare Premium for free. Yes, that's right, my friends. Using the link in the video description, click on that, 2 months for free, and you can get your learning on. You can make sure that you're doing everything for the best of advancing your career, just getting high quality classes in an area of interest, or specifically learning more about something that you care deeply about, or padding your resume. It's always good to have extra skill sets on hand, and Skillshare is going to be there for you. So use the link in the video description. After a month with the Switch Lite, I think I've got a pretty good handle on the device. One, because it's small and my massive gargantuan hands can grip it really easily, but also just because the more time I've spent with it, the more I can clearly realize its successes and, more importantly, its failures and limitations as a console. So let's go ahead and talk about those. So on paper, the Switch Lite actually has a lot to love. It's a much more portable version of one of the best-selling consoles of this generation. It's remarkably similar in a lot of ways to the original Switch. It has all of the same buttons in roughly the same spot, the same USB Type-C port at the bottom, game card slot at the top, micro SD card slot at the bottom, and generally has all of the same design language as the OG Switch. It's only 0.7 inches smaller than the original Switch while keeping the exact same screen resolution, so it actually has a higher pixel density than the original Switch. And structurally, it feels really solid in the hands while also improving on some of the few design failures that the original Switch had, such as thicker plastic up at the top of the exhaust vents, which were prone to crack and stress break on the original. There's also upgrades such as the D-pad that has replaced the directional arrows on the original Joy-Cons, and the D-pad on the Lite actually feels pretty good, almost as good as the Switch Pro controller's D-pad. But the rest of the buttons are clearly mushier and feels a little bit cheaper. And depending on who you are, you might not even get all of the right buttons. One dude got 2 Y buttons. And then the speakers are now also downwards firing, which works in a handheld position since your hands help to reflect the sound back at you. Poor palm positioning or having meaty claws could hinder your experience here, but my dainty slap machines cupped the Switch Lite in such a way that it ended up in a supplementary experience. And then the battery life is also improved upon, getting roughly 1.5 to 2 more hours than the original Switch, but roughly 2 to 3 hours less than the updated Switch that released at the same time as the Switch Lite. More specifically, in our testing with Breath of the Wild at max brightness and max volume, our original Switch has 69% battery remaining after an hour of gameplay. Nice. While the Switch Lite had 75% left. After 2 hours, the original was down to 37%, whereas the Switch Lite was just under half at 49%. And it actually appears that Nintendo put a brighter and warmer screen on the Switch Lite, just like they did on the updated Switch. It has about 20 to 30 more nits of brightness, so the Switch Lite getting a better battery life, even with a more vivid display on it. Obviously, this is due to the better efficiency of the NVIDIA chip that's going into the new Switch and the Switch Lite, but it's still actually a welcome addition nonetheless. However, with the Switch Lite, you still lose a few things. There's no HD rumble motors present in the Joy-Cons, which also you can't detach the Joy-Cons, so you're stuck with it the way that it is, and you can't put it in a regular Switch dock. Trust us, we tried. You can get other custom docks for the Switch Lite, but those will just be relegated to charging the unit and not making it set up for TV mode. You also lose a kickstand, which is an unnecessary removal in my opinion. You still have the SD card slot, why couldn't they just put a kickstand in there? Obviously they cut it due to manufacturing costs to bring the cost of the Switch Lite down, but at the same time, if you want to try to use an external controller, the Joy-Cons, the Switch Pro controller, it then becomes awkward. You either have to find something like a battery to prop it up, or you have to buy a stand like these ones that are on Amazon, or you have to put it in your lap and then play and then develop a hunchback like Quasimodo and just get used to, ringing a toll bell forever. But the biggest downfall of the Nintendo Switch Lite and the biggest limitation has nothing to do with its physical design or any sort of weird quirks that are implemented in the device itself, but rather it's Nintendo's own software of how it handles primary and secondary devices. So this won't affect all people, and it has its workarounds, but it stands out as an unnecessary grievance for something that Nintendo pitched as a completely portable device. It actually is not so in some instances. So the shot at the beginning of the video where I'm on the airplane, disappointed by my Nintendo Switch, was my introduction to Nintendo's terrible system. I brought the Switch Lite with me on a day trip to Cape Town, expecting to be able to play on the 2-hour plane trip there and the 2-hour plane trip back, only to be greeted by the screen that said that I needed internet connection for them to verify with Nintendo servers that I was allowed to play the own games that I purchased. Now, all of this happened because I have my Switch Lite as a secondary device. My son's, their regular Switch is what is the primary device, and I just activated the Lite on the account to use all of the games that I already purchased. So Nintendo is actually preventing me from actually playing the games that I bought because my Switch Lite is a secondary device. And there are workarounds. I could set my Lite as the primary device and keep my son's Switch as the secondary device, and that would work because it's in the house, it's connected to Wi-Fi, it can typically get verified with Nintendo servers, but then that presents a few issues, like if we go on road trips, or in a couple weeks when we have to go back to the United States, we have to choose who gets to use a Switch and who doesn't, who is the primary and who is the secondary. Or because we live in South Africa, we have a thing called load shedding, where the government can turn the power off for 6 to 8 hours a day, and then we have to choose again who gets to play on the Switch. The only surefire way around this would be to get a separate account for both of the Switches, or to have only physical copies of the game, because Nintendo's limitation is only with the downloaded versions of games. And I can understand Nintendo's need to have a verification system in place in order to make sure that one account isn't playing in multiple online multiplayer games. That makes sense, but it literally harms nothing to allow me to play my offline single player games at the same time as my kids. If they're playing the same game, I should be able to play the same game. I purchased the game. Or at the very least, we could play 2 different games even if I'm offline. Now, to be slightly fair to Nintendo, this is an atypical situation. Sony has roughly the same necessity of requiring 2 different devices to be connected to the internet, at least the secondary, in order to verify that nobody's playing the same game. But Sony never pitched the PlayStation as a completely portable device. Nintendo did with the Switch Lite, so offline gaming is a must, even if it is a secondary or tertiary device on an account. And then finally, there are just some games that can't be played on the Switch Lite. Any game that you're gonna play on the Switch Lite has to have handheld mode. And while the list of games that do not support a handheld mode is pretty small, if you're somebody who wants to play 1-2 Switch or Super Mario Party, you're actually not gonna be able to use the Switch Lite at all for those games. And then another issue that I've seen thrown around the internet regarding the Switch Lite is actually the JoyCon Drift issue that plagued the original Switch. 100% of my JoyCon sets have experienced this drift issue. Reece has had a set that has also done that. So that is 4 out of 4 sets of Nintendo Joy-Cons that have actually developed this drift. Our Switch Lite at the moment is completely fine. But from what I can see that's been reported online, there's actually not that many cases of drift being reported with the Lite, if there are even Joy-Con drift issues at all. Most of the articles were referencing a single video that a user uploaded to the internet right around the time that the Switch Lite launched. And then on top of that, I found maybe 5 more instances in this entire past month, but most of those appeared to be defective consoles rather than systemic issues, and most of those were posted around the original time of the Switch Lite launch. It doesn't seem like there's a growing list of users who are having this issue a month after launch. It actually seems to be just situated to the people who reported it at the very beginning. So it actually seems to me, at least, that a lot of it was built up around the entire lawsuit that's going against Nintendo for their Joy-Con drift issues and the Switch Lite being added to that. It seems to be hype around Nintendo failing, not necessarily actual failure that's happening on the Switch Lite. However, considering that Nintendo is using the same parts in these Joy-Con analog sticks that they used in the original Switch, I wouldn't necessarily hold my breath that they won't develop the issues as time goes on in the coming months or years. But the Switch Lite has a lot to love. The smaller size, the matte plastic, the positioning of everything makes it an exceptionally lovely console for long-term gameplay anywhere. The battery life, the screen density, and the speaker improvements have definitely served to make it a much more enjoyable mobile experience than the original Switch, and coming in at $100 less for $199 makes it essentially a no-brainer for anybody who is looking for a new portable gaming system. It's a modern-day Game Boy. Yet there's still some major drawbacks that cause it to be in a weird purgatory of console-like tendencies and purely handheld necessities. How can they even call it a Switch if you cannot go from handheld mode to TV mode and switch between the two, which is the entire premise of the name? Nintendo has made all of the right moves when it comes to the physical design of the Switch, yet missed a lot in the software side of how people will actually use the device. The ability to have two Switch consoles connected to the same account and being able to play them simultaneously anywhere at any time is a must for me and my family. Having to get around that by setting up a separate account or getting physical copies of the games is a first world burden that I actually don't want to bear. And especially since I purchased the games that are on my original Switch. I technically own the rights to download those and use them. If Nintendo can reconfigure this, the Switch Lite then becomes easily the best console for me because of all of its perks, such as having the latest games, the battery life, being able to tote it around wherever I want to go, chucking in the backpack. It seems durable enough to actually withstand my abusive tendencies when it comes to my portable devices. If you're going to only have one Nintendo Switch, then the Lite is actually a compelling choice if you want something smaller and easier to tote around than the original. You just lose the extra battery life of the updated Switch, the ability to dock it, and the ability to swap out a Joy-Con when yours starts to go crazy and not even allowing you to select the game that you want to play because it just gets ridiculous. But for many, including myself, all of those trade-offs is something that I would willingly do for this console. I absolutely love the Nintendo Switch, and as soon, if probably not, Nintendo will resolve the primary and secondary issues, I will keep this long term. Until then, I'm a little bit disappointed by it, and I don't know if I could recommend it to everybody. Skillshare, where you can get 2 months for free of Skillshare Premium to learn from all of the high quality classes that are around. Get your learning on, business, design, whatever you want. Make sure you're smart. Use Skillshare, because you are smart, and you get smarter. Now all of this, yikes, wind. This is why you need a stand.